Good morning and welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. I'm Joe Lakin, filling in today for Scott. We've got a great panel here today to talk all things Missouri politics. First up, we've got Taylor Jackson, a Democrat consultant. Thank you for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
We also have Elad Gross, a Democratic candidate for Missouri Attorney General. Thanks for being on.
Appreciate it.
Representative John Wiemann, last but not least, the Republican pro tem of the Missouri House. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to start today talking special session. Big news out of Jeff City as Missouri Governor Mike Parson called for a special session to combat violent crime here in Missouri. Tell us what to expect.
Well, as you mentioned, the governor has called us back to session for a special session. He's called it to be July 27th, the week of July 27th. At this point, the House has decided to not go first as far as looking at the bills that he wants us to look at. We've asked the Senate to take that up first. And so as far as when we think that will happen, it's hard to say. We're 18 days away from a primary election. That's one issue we have. Trying to figure out, what the Senate's going to do is really still in question. But I suspect we'll probably see some action early. Maybe we'll clock in, and then they'll wait for the Senate to kind of do their business.
Tell us a little bit about provisions and laws and changes that we can expect to be considered and what was in the call.
Right. Well, the governor did put a call out. He tried to make it extremely narrow as far as what he wanted to address, basically violent crime issues that we didn't get dealt with during the regular session this year because of COVID and just our shortened session. So I think his plan is for us to go back and try to address some issues that he thinks will be helpful with addressing violent crime in Missouri, specifically in St. Louis and Kansas City areas. One in particular comes off the top of my head was witness protection. There's some other issues relating to armed criminal activity. So those are some things that he wants us to really go back and try to see if we can fix, because as we know, the crime rate, especially in St. Louis, is way ahead of its normal. I think we're over 130, maybe 135 deaths so far. It seems like every day I hear on the news there's 2 more deaths, there's 4 deaths. So I think that's the reason why the governor is wanting us to try to address that.
Yeah. Elad, running for Attorney General, one of the provisions I've heard talked a lot about, and earlier this year, and I believe last year even, is sort of the jurisdiction of the Missouri Attorney General over a place like the city where the state has sort of a different view of criminal activity. Give us your thoughts as somebody running for Attorney General. Do you support that type of reform? Do you think that's helpful, or do you think it's hurtful?
Look, so I put out a pretty comprehensive crime plan that focuses on violent crime, and it does not include taking away local control from local communities to deal with the issues that they're facing. I think that's a very important role. Now, I would like to see the Attorney General spend a lot more time trying to collaborate with our local prosecutors. I've been speaking to prosecutors not just in major metropolitan areas, because unfortunately homicides are increasing all across the state right now. Not just in these two. I mean, these are where a lot of people are living, so we see high numbers. But in Columbia, we're seeing a spike. In Springfield, we're seeing a huge spike too. St. Joseph. I'd like to see a much more coordinated approach to dealing with violent crime. And there are some provisions that the governor has proposed. I'm not super partisan or anything, so I'll give him credit where it's due. Witness protection, I think, is extremely important. We need to fund that. We need to also have a plan in place that makes sure that program works. For so many folks that I've worked with in teaching, and especially in North St. Louis City, where folks don't feel like they're protected, they won't come forward. But there are some issues with what has been proposed. I don't think we need to send more juveniles to adult prison. I don't think that's the right way to go with that. And so I'm hoping that there will be some pretty vigorous debate on those issues. And we've got that plan out there already. So happy to be a part of that as much as I can.
I assume we can expect vigorous debate if past special sessions are any indication.
I would think so. Yeah.
Tell us put you on the spot here a little bit. One thing that could be done in a special session to combat violent crime.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you think is most important?
Yeah, I'd really like to see. I'd like to see a lot more investment in communities to deal with the root causes of why we're seeing so much violent crime. And a lot of that is because folks do not have opportunity. I have taught kids for 13 years, and when you have a 3rd grader who is telling you, "What's the point of me reading?" because it's not going to matter. We've got some serious problems. And when we're cutting the budget for education, which a lot of it's going to happen because of the crisis we're in, but we're investing that money instead in building more prisons or in policies that really aren't working for our communities, that's a problem. So I'd like to see some pretty concerted investment in our people. One of those plans for violence and in reducing violence are these mediators, these community mediators who are hired from the community. It's a wonderful jobs program too, but one where now it's not just law enforcement that's doing all of the heavy lifting. It's also people from that community who are trained to prevent violent crime. And it's been shown that when you do that in conjunction with focused deterrence and law enforcement practices, it can be extremely effective in reducing violent crime.
Yeah, Taylor, one of the pieces of Governor Parson's bio that I think is most compelling from a campaign perspective is his background in law enforcement as a sheriff, Army veteran. What do you think? How does this play out? Does sort of the increased focus on law and order this fall, is that something that allows Governor Parson to really focus on a different part of his background and his biography and sort of play into his hands, or do you think this rise in crime is something that's going to be a problem for him in the fall?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I do find the timing of the special session to be interesting and maybe suspicious in some ways. We're in an election cycle. We're close to a primary election in which folks have a lot of important primaries coming up. I do think we're seeing a rise. I live in St. Louis City. I am, no stranger to the violence that's facing our cities here. But I have to echo what Elad said. I think we're seeing, there's a lot of root causes of crime, and people don't have educational opportunities. We're seeing, housing issues. People don't have places to live. I would be interested in seeing Parson, address some of those issues as we come toward the election. He faces a really strong Democratic opponent in Nicole Galloway, who's rising in the polls and has come out, strongly in support of racial justice and in support of some of these underlying issues. So, I do think this is a piece of Parson's plan moving forward, is to address these things and highlight, the law and order piece, but I'm not sure the voters are going to buy it. I think they want to see more comprehensive plan moving forward.
Well, speaking of crime in St. Louis City or not, depending on your perspective, let's talk a little bit about this McCloskey couple, Kim Gardner's involvement. I think this is, like most things these days, has created an opportunity for everybody to say they're right. Tell us, they've kind of become a cause for Republicans and conservatives who said they were defending their property. Others, including Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner, have confiscated the weapons seemingly and appear to be investigating them for a crime. Give us your thoughts on that. It's sort of a strange wrinkle in an already strange year.
Yeah, every day is an adventure, to say the least. I think, I've been a part of protests before in the city of St. Louis. I know Elad has as well. I can only imagine from a protest perspective how incredibly frightening that would be. And I've spoken to people who were there and on the ground and, walking peacefully as they have the right to do. And we're really confronted with this issue. We can debate all day whether they had the right to do that on their property. I will step aside from that issue. My concern really is the federal government's now intervention in Kim Gardner's authority on this topic. I saw Hawley yesterday announce that he was going to do a federal investigation into Gardner's handling of the case. I think we have folks who like to tout support for local control, which I agree is an important piece. And I think it's an overstepping of authority. So I think that's something for us to watch moving forward.
Yeah, I've been around politics long enough. I realize local control may be the most fungible political theory out there. But Elad, talk about this as a potential or as a candidate for Attorney General. Talk about, is this something? I think a lot of people who are watching this think Kim Gardner is not prosecuting on a number of things that are on the books, on statute, and then she's going after people who are seemingly defending their home, although who knows where the facts lie on that. But talk a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on it?
You said it perfectly. It's a situation that's been created where everybody gets to say they're right, and that's where our political system is right now. It's just so ridiculous. It's sad because there are so many, and we've already talked about a lot of them. There's so many important issues for us to be dealing with right now. And it's just sad that this is the thing. It's entertaining, I guess, if people enjoy it. Look, we don't know what all of those facts are. That's the job of law enforcement to investigate. So it's not just Kim Gardner. It's also the police department that's looking into all of this. They're the ones who have recommended something to her office, and then she has to decide what to do about that. I've had my disagreements with with St. Louis, the circuit attorney. I've actually filed a lawsuit that was involved with the workhouse and a lot of the violations that were going on there, and made a lot of changes, which I'm happy to see. I think that what we really, this is really highlighting how important it is for us to get involved in local prosecutorial races and local races in general, and to see what's happening on the local level from all of these plans. I mean, there's a lot of reforms that she's put into place. For example, a conviction review unit, where we're looking to see that folks shouldn't be in prison when they're innocent. And unfortunately, our Attorney General's fighting that right now. So, yeah, I mean, this issue, yeah, sure, it's entertaining, and I trust the law enforcement to do their job and to investigate and figure out what the heck is going on. I don't know if it's the best situation where you have politicians who are stepping in, and especially elected ones, who are now making public statements with a very big microphone, potentially tainting a jury throughout the state. So I worry a bit about that.
I don't think he's talking about you, Representative Wiemann.
You say whatever you want. You're fine. Yeah, you got your own district. You're okay.
Let's talk about this a little bit. So whether the Democrats at this table like it, and I'm quite certain they don't. Missouri has been a very pro Second Amendment state. Chris Koster, the last Democrat standard bearer for governor, was endorsed by the NRA. Is this something where the legislature looks at yet again an expansion of Castle Doctrine or a clarification as a result of this? Do you think there's a legislative fallout from this at some point, or do you think this is sort of a flash in the pan and everybody moves forward from it?
Certainly, I think we are always looking at ways to improve our statutes and our laws with regards to a lot of things. In particular, we're always looking at the gun rights and Second Amendment. I voted for the Castle Doctrine. I believe it was the right thing for us to do to preserve Missourians' right to their Second Amendment right. The situation, as Elad had mentioned with regards to the McCloskeys, we don't have all the facts. I've only seen information from the news media and maybe some other sources. I don't have the inside details specifically what occurred. So it's really unfair for me to say, whether the McCloskeys were completely in the right or completely in the wrong, or if they did something illegal. I don't know yet. We don't know yet. I would tell you that on the surface, it certainly looks like they were on their property. They were brandishing weapons, and there was no, at least from the Castle Doctrine standpoint, they felt threatened, and they have a right to defend themselves on their property if they felt that their lives was in danger. So that's going to be up to the courts to decide, up to to the prosecutor to decide whether there was an actual crime committed. But the law is the law, and they do have the right to defend themselves if they feel threatened on their property. So as far as future legislation, I wouldn't be surprised. I always say it seems like every year we bring up something regarding Second Amendment, and sometimes we get legislation through, and a lot of times we don't, because it's not a particular issue. We've done a lot of laws in Missouri. We're probably one of the most, when it comes to having protections for Second Amendment. We're probably at the top of the list as far as states that protect Missourians' rights.
Yeah, great. All right, well, we're going to take a break here. We'll be right back to talk about Governor Parson's COVID response.
Mark Mantovani alone took on the corrupt machine. Now he'll finish the job. Mark Mantovani. He built a national business creating nearly 800 good-paying jobs. And during the last recession, Mark cut his pay in half to save jobs. The only candidate for county executive with the experience to rebuild our economy after COVID and create a more equitable county with more opportunity for everyone. Career politicians haven't gotten it done. Democrat Mark Mantovani. Real leadership for a change.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
Every year, billions of our tax dollars go to Washington, D.C. And those tax dollars, where do they go? To 37 other states like California and New York to pay for their health care. Amendment 2 would fix that. By expanding Medicaid, Amendment 2 would bring our tax dollars back to Missouri to protect thousands of healthcare jobs, help keep our rural hospitals open, boost our economy, and deliver healthcare to more veterans and hardworking Missouri families. Vote yes on Amendment 2.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. Taylor, we're going to go back to you. Talking a little bit COVID response here. Nationally, at the state level, at the local level, every political leader in the country is trying to figure out the response. Give us your take on Governor Parson's response here. How has he done? Where has he fallen short? And where has he excelled?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way he has fallen short in particular is waiting too late to make a decision. So I live in St. Louis City. We have had a mask mandate for, a month now. And I frankly don't think we would be in the situation we are in now if the state and federal leadership had taken action sooner. I think it was too little, too late in a lot of ways, and it's caused a lot of confusion for folks who maybe live in rural Missouri and don't have any restrictions, but maybe work in the city and are trying to figure out what exactly they need to do. So, I think to sum it up, it was too little, too late, and we should have seen stronger action early on.
Elad, you've been traveling this big state. There are unique corners of the state. Every county, every town is different. The governor's taken a very local control focused approach to this, recognizing every community is different. Do you think that's right? Do you think it should be a statewide mandate on these rules and regulations, or do you think it's right to allow rural communities to handle it however's best, and states or cities and counties to handle it how they feel it's best?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be, local control is going to be a very essential part of all of this, right? The problem is the virus doesn't really recognize local control. It doesn't recognize the borders of the counties. It doesn't recognize the borders of our states. And that's scary, right? Because you don't know when it's going to pop up. And if it pops up, what I'm really worried about is I'm really worried about schools. I'm really worried about what's going to happen when we start schools, what's going to happen if a kid tests positive. Does that mean the teacher has to isolate? All the other kids have to isolate? I mean, we really haven't answered a lot of those questions. And I know teachers already are severely underpaid in this state, don't have the resource. We've been cutting a lot of the money, too, that they're going to have for this next year. And so that's what really worries me right now. I would love to see a plan on how to deal with that in Missouri statewide.
Representative Wiemann, it's always easier to shoot at elected officials when you're sort of sitting on the sidelines watching as a voter. Tough issues here, right? I mean, something nobody on maybe February 1st or January 1st ever perceived that we'd be in this, both from an economic, from a health perspective. Give Governor Parson a rating on this. Where is he excelled? What's your sense of sort of how he's handling it, up to this point and moving forward?
Well, I believe the governor's done a good job of trying to deal with something that none of us have ever dealt with. We've had pandemics throughout the history of the world many times, much more severe than what we've had with COVID. And with the governor dealing with something that he has never dealt with in his political career, and none of us have, I think he's done a good job of addressing it. I like his approach for making it be more of a local decision, with regards to whether you have a face mask mandate or if you quarantine and those kind of things. I think he's held the ground on that as far as making sure that's a local decision. I typically don't like to have government mandates. I'd rather it be private industry. If they don't want to have someone come into their establishment that's not wearing a face mask, then leave it up to them. So the governor, every day is a different day, and there's always different circumstances. I think he's remained open to, if he had it to make changes to address if the problem got worse, he would make those changes. If you look at the numbers, I mean, I was talking to our county executive in St. Charles County. I'm from St. Charles County, And we were looking at the numbers, and St. Charles County's numbers have been steadily going down, although there's been an increase in the testing of positive cases, but the number of deaths hasn't really significantly tracked with the number of increases in COVID testing positive. But he made the point was that really the issue is with us, at least in St. Charles County, and I think this is across the state of Missouri, is that most of the people that are dying are those that are in the older cohorts, the 60, 70, 80-year-olds. And the younger population certainly is out there, and they're not as concerned about their health, and they may be possibly causing more of this virus to spread. But if you look at the number of hospitalizations, you look at the number of people that are testing positive and the people who are dying, ultimately that's what the most important thing is, who's dying and who's going into the hospital in for extended period of time on ventilators. Those numbers have been tracking down, and I've got the CDC numbers, which I thought, I'm going to look at them and see what they say, and it's obvious they're all across the country, they're going down. Now granted, there are hot spots in Missouri, there are hot spots in Florida and other places, but I think it's going to eventually, those will cycle through.
Let's talk a little bit. You can't talk about that without thinking about campaigns, right? Everything's sort of intermingled right now. 2016, Republicans win every statewide race. President Trump wins by 19, and we sweep him. I know a lot will probably have a different opinion on this, but what's your prediction? Do Republicans hold all the statewides this cycle yet again?
I hate making these kind of predictions, especially this far out from an election. We haven't even had a primary election yet, and then we're a ways from the November election. I used to kid with people last year when I was asked about, Donald Trump and how, do you think he was going to get reelected? I said, well, if everything stays the way it is right now, I think, yeah, he would win. But nothing ever stays the same, exactly at that point in time. It changes. And there's a lot of things could happen either way in favor of or against President Trump and against Governor Parsons and the rest of the folks that are up for re-election. So it's really difficult. My gut feeling is I think if the economy continues to hopefully improve, we get through this COVID crisis situation where we don't see a continuation of the spiking in the positive COVID cases, hospitalizations go down, things start to get back to somewhat of a normal situation, then I think Republicans will do well in Missouri and hold their own. Certainly there'll be surprises, but that's the best I can do given this far out from an election.
Yeah, I'm not even going to bother asking you that question because I know.
You said there's going to be surprises. You all heard it. I heard it. I love it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Let's talk about an election up here in a couple weeks. Medicaid expansion on the ballot. Huge money coming in support.
Yeah.
Appears a campaign against it starting to materialize. What's your prediction? Does that pass?
Yeah, it's going to pass. I think it's going to pass. It's going to have some very big benefits for our state. I know that there's a lot of folks who are working on this all throughout Missouri right now, so I believe it's going to pass, yeah.
Taylor, same question to you.
Yep, I absolutely agree. I think it's going to pass. I think, if we've seen anything come out of the coronavirus pandemic, we can debate what the response has been. I think it's really clear that we need folks to have healthcare access. Quite frankly, I want people who are working at the drugstore I go to and the grocery store I go to be able to seek, preventative and important care. So I think it'll pass. I think we're seeing a strong surge in rural Missouri of folks really strongly in support of it, especially as those rural hospitals continue to close and decline. I feel very strongly that it'll pass this cycle.
Representative Wiemann, I have run a fair share of campaigns over the years, and I tell you what, there is no better position to be on than the no side of a campaign. Voters are skeptical.
True.
And I have seen ridiculous attacks against campaigns significantly harm them, especially on ballot measures where these issues sort of have a base, but they don't have a partisan base that holds voters together, so the numbers can drop quickly. What is your gut? Is this something that's going to pass? Do you think the opponents have the ability to organize and get it beat?
Well, for full disclosure, I'm certainly not in favor of Medicaid expansion for a variety of reasons. But to answer your question whether I think it's going to pass, it's pretty close. Certainly the folks that are in favor of it have a lot of money to spend to convince Missourians that it's the right thing to do on TV and newspapers and whatnot. I do believe there is an effort to try to get the message out on the other side of the coin as to here's what are the downsides to us expanding Medicaid. And I think the race will be close, just like it was in Oklahoma. I mean, they technically lost that ballot initiative, and then they won it on the absentee ballot. So
Lost election day voting.
correct. And so I don't know if that'll happen in Missouri. I think it's going to be close either way. I don't think it's going to be a landslide that it's going to be a 60 or 70% are going to be in favor of expanding Medicaid. I think it's going to be more like 55, 45, somewhere in that rate either way.
Yeah, it's been interesting as with COVID and the increased early voting, you sort of wonder if the number of votes that are banked before Election Day ultimately don't allow that to hold on. Let's end here today talking a little bit of national politics. I'm sure we'll all agree on all of this. President Trump obviously dealing with the economy, dealing with COVID. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but and I like to remind people, the Access Hollywood tape was released about 30 days before the election, and it was a wild 30 days. We're years ahead of that, or years until we get there. Tell us, what's your sense on where this wild election goes? President Trump, his prospects, Democrats are writing him off. What's your sense of sort of the national politics?
Well, I think Trump's got him right where he wants him. As far as he's been in this position before. He made a change in his campaign staff, which that's not uncommon. That happens on both sides of the party spectrum. You make changes in your campaign management, but he's looking to obviously make some changes in his campaign organization, try to get things revved up. But he still has plenty of time. We're a long way from November, and he's got time to get his numbers back up. But I'm optimistic that he will outperform like he always does.
All right, we've got about a minute left here. Let's talk about this. Biden, Trump. One word. Who wins?
Biden. I think so. That's more than one word now. I mean, you're just like looking at me, but yeah, I think the whole thing's a mess. Vote local, people. Please do that.
Taylor, Biden.
I think Biden, but he's got to do a better job talking to rural voters, and I think that's one of the reasons Trump did well in a state like Missouri. I think we're seeing that change across the Democratic Party. It needs to.
All right, John Wiemann. Who won the week?
Oh, who won the week? I'm going to go with campaign consultants. And the reason why is because they're going to make a ton of money in the next next 18 days because of all these flyers and TV commercials, and so I think they won the week.
Well, their families have to eat too,
That's right.
Elad, tell us, who won the week?
Our newest governor, Tucker Carlson.
Taylor.
The Missouri Democratic Party Staff Union. It takes guts to put yourself out there like that, and I admire the work that they're doing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. Joe Lakin filling in for Scott Faughn on This Week in Missouri Politics. We'll be back next Sunday. Thank you.
Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, Spire, and Sterling Bank.